It's the early hours of the morning in an American city. Most of the streets are still asleep, wrapped in silence. And then, out of nowhere, bagpipes. Thousands of voices rising between the buildings, flags hanging from every window. An entire neighborhood woken up by an army that traveled thousands of miles just to be here. They waited almost 3 decades for this single moment. Years of heartbreak, years of watching from home, years of quietly telling themselves, maybe next time. And now, at long last, they're here. Not just to follow a football team, but to remind the entire world exactly who they are. This is the story of how a tiny nation and the most loyal supporters in football conquered America. The story of 28 years of pain, and what happened when it all finally came pouring out. This is the story of Scotland. To understand why this means so much, you first have to understand the weight. Because for an entire generation, Scotland simply weren't there. The biggest stage in all of football, the World Cup, slowly became something that happened to other countries. Scottish fans watched the drama unfold. They watched the upsets, the magic, the glory, but always from the outside, always as spectators, never part of the story itself. And it wasn't from a lack of trying, far from it. Tournament after tournament, the heartbreak repeated itself like a cruel pattern that refused to break. Agonizing near misses, qualifying nights that ended in stunned silence, games where they were just one goal, one moment, one heartbeat away, always so close, and always, somehow, just short. For a country that lives and breathes this sport, that pain ran deep. The kind of pain that doesn't fade, the kind that builds up year after year after year, until it has absolutely nowhere left to go. So when the day finally arrived, when Scotland qualified once again for the World Cup, it wasn't just relief, it was an explosion. Nearly 30 years of bottled-up longing released all at once. Grown men in tears, strangers hugging in the streets. A whole nation that had waited a lifetime, suddenly daring to believe again. One fan said it better than anyone. He had traveled with his elderly father, and he explained it simply. "We waited a lifetime for this," he said, "and at his dad's age, you just never know if this might be the last one." That single sentence holds everything. Behind every flag, behind every song, behind every tear shed in those stadiums. Because for so many of these supporters, this was never just a holiday. It was a pilgrimage, a once-in-a-lifetime journey they were never even sure they would get to take. And so they were determined to make every single second of it count. What happened next is something that nobody could have predicted. Not the fans, not the locals, not even Scotland themselves. Because the supporters, known all around the world as the Tartan Army, didn't just show up to watch a few football matches. They took over entire cities. It started with songs echoing through the streets, flags draped across every corner, bars packed to the very edge of bursting, from early morning right through to the dead of night. And then came the stories that spread across the entire planet. Reports of bars completely drinking dry, whole districts swallowed up in a sea of tartan. Locals who had never met a Scottish person in their lives suddenly swept up in the sheer joy of it all. And then came the moment that truly broke the internet. At a baseball game of all places, thousands of Scottish fans poured into the stadium and made it their own. By the end of the night, the entire crowd, locals and Scots together, were singing the Tartan Army's beloved anthem, that famous old disco track they've adopted as their own. The clips went viral within hours. People who had never watched a single minute of football in their lives were suddenly captivated by these traveling supporters and their unstoppable sense of fun. And they didn't stop there. They did it again, and again, and again, city after city. Thousands marching through the streets behind the sound of bagpipes. Strangers pulled into the celebration whether they liked it or not. It grew so enormous that even people far outside the world of football began to take notice. Figures from across sport and entertainment found themselves charmed by this group of fans who seemed to carry happiness with them everywhere they went. There were even talks of returning the favor, of bringing a slice of American sport all the way to Scotland one day, just because of the impression these supporters left behind. Think for a second about what that actually means. A football team came to compete, but it was the supporters who left the deepest mark of all. They didn't just visit a country, they won it over completely. Everywhere they went, the message painted boldly across their flags said it all. No Scotland, no party. For a nation that had been forced to wait so long, the fans made absolutely certain of one thing. The world wouldn't simply see Scotland this time. The world would fall in love with Scotland, and once it did, it would never ever forget them. Now, before we get into the team itself and the history they were chasing, do me a quick favor. If you're enjoying this story so far, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you know, and it means you won't miss the next one. Now, let's get back to it. Because while the supporters were busy writing their own legend off the pitch, the team had a far, far harder job on it. And for all the joy in the stands, Scotland have always carried one quiet, painful truth. In their entire history, across every World Cup they have ever played in, they have never once reached the knockout stage. Never gone beyond those opening rounds. So close, so many times, always falling at that final, brutal hurdle. This was their chance to change that story forever, to rewrite decades of disappointment in a single tournament. It was never going to be simple. The campaign brought hope and heartbreak in equal measure. There were moments of pure belief, where it felt like destiny had finally chosen them. And there were moments of cruelty, where the dream seemed to slip straight through their fingers all over again. That is the burden this team carries onto the pitch. Not just the weight of a single tournament, but the weight of an entire nation's history. Every player who pulls on that dark blue shirt understands it completely. They aren't only playing for themselves, they are playing for every fan who waited, every supporter who traveled across the world, every person back home who grew up never once seeing their country on this stage. The manager faced impossible decisions at every turn. Do you sit deep and defend for your life, protecting everything you've built? Or do you dare to throw caution aside and chase glory? The talisman, the beating heart of this team, the man whose name the fans roar the loudest, had to drag his side forward through sheer force of will. And around him stood a group of players asked to do something no Scotland team had ever managed before. To be brave when bravery was hardest. To believe when belief made the least possible sense. Even through injuries and setbacks, with key men ruled out and the odds stacked high against them, they refused to back down. This is a team punching far, far above its weight. Built not on superstars and enormous price tags, but on heart, on unity, on a stubborn refusal to ever give up. And in that way, they mirror their own supporters perfectly. Underestimated, overlooked, doubted by almost everyone, but absolutely, completely fearless. And that, right there, is the magic of Scotland. They have never been the biggest. They have never been the favorites. Nobody ever expects them to be the story. But they show up anyway with every single thing they have, and somehow they make the whole world fall in love with them in the process. Time and time again, nobody sees it coming. And time again, they leave a mark that lasts. Because in the end, this was always about so much more than results. It was about belonging, about a song shared between total strangers in a faraway city, about an old man finally watching his country on the greatest stage in the game with his son standing proudly beside him, about a young Scottish kid somewhere watching all of this unfold on a screen and starting to dream that one day it might just be their turn too. Win or lose, that is the legacy of this Scotland team and the army that follows them everywhere. They reminded the entire world that football was never only about lifting trophies. It's about passion. It's about pride. It's about a small nation that absolutely refuses to be forgotten. No matter how long the wait, no matter how steep the odds. The world has watched 1,000 football teams come and go, but very few ever leave a mark quite like this one. Very few make people smile the way these fans do. And whatever happens next, whatever the result, one simple truth will always remain. The Tartan Army didn't need a trophy to win. They won the very moment they arrived. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Scotland and their fans were the best story of the entire tournament? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, because I read them all and I'd love to know where you stand. And if this video gave you chills, or made you smile, or made you fall just a little bit in love with Scotland too, then hit that like button and subscribe, because there is so much more of this still to come. Until next time, remember, no Scotland, no party.